to you real quick.
We'll go with it.
Rolling yet?
Okay, I'm ready. You guys ready?
Let's go.
All right, we already got the marker and everything? Okay, good. So one of the things, Stephan, that I'm fascinated about with you, and as I've gotten to know you over a couple of years,
Okay.
is I'm fascinated where you came from. You know, I think to me you're an American success story, and as Alzamend becomes even more successful, it's going to be clear about your background. So maybe you could talk about where you came from, because I think it's a fascinating story.
Not that fascinating, but okay.
Oh, it's fascinating.
So I was born and raised in South America in Guyana. You know, most people know Guyana because of Jim Jones
Right.
and the massacre that took place there.
The Kool-Aid, right.
So if Kool-Aid, exactly. So, you know, good thing about it is that I never drank the Kool-Aid, so that's good. So
How far were you away from Jonestown?
Jonestown is probably about 50 miles out of Georgetown. So,
Georgetown?
yeah, so I was born and raised in Georgetown, Guyana, which is the
Nice.
capital. Most of the people from Guyana lives in Georgetown.
And when did you move to the United States?
I moved to the United States in 1987.
Wow.
So yeah, so I moved in 1987, came here, lived in New Jersey, and went to high school and then college in New Jersey.
Oh, so you went to high school there? Because I know
Yeah.
you attended Stevens Institute of Technology.
I
right?
did. Mhm.
You got your
In New
master's
Jersey.
there from too, right?
Got my bachelor's and master's. Bachelor's in mechanical engineering, and I was more of a geek in school, so I loved science and math.
Mm-hmm.
And so I majored in steam and nuclear power plant designs.
Wow.
Hated that.
Really?
When it's time to graduate, and I realized all the companies that were coming to interview you,
Sure.
and I was, I had a job offer from Knowles Atomic Power Laboratories, Westinghouse, and I was like, oh, is that what I'm going to be doing?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I really don't want to do this. I was
Right.
like, I wanted to be someplace, pretty much corporate, learning different, skills. And I said, well, this is really going to be like 100% math and calculating in science. So L'Oreal actually came and said, hey, we're looking for someone in our management program. They're going to be traveling internationally. They're going to be going to France, Italy, Germany. I was like,
Wow.
sign me up. That's the one I want to do.
So for those of you who don't know,
So-
Stephan is Stephan is the CEO of Alzamend Neuro, a biotech based in Tampa, Florida, with two drug treatments. One is a immunotherapy vaccine for Alzheimer's, and one is a co-crystal lithium-based treatment for Alzheimer's. They call it aggravation, right?
Agitation. So basically, one is a lithium co-crystal for agitation with patients with Alzheimer's, and that's to slow the progression of Alzheimer's potentially. And the other is a immunotherapeutic vaccine that we anticipate will be a prophylactic and cure for Alzheimer's.
We hope, obviously.
hope.
Yeah, everybody, we're making sure we're not claiming it is a cure. We're saying we hope it's a
That's
cure.
why I said anticipate.
Yeah. I tend to people since I've been on Wall Street so long, and the people that do know me, I tend to anything I say, you got to put in front of that. We hope. That's
Oh
gonna
yeah,
be
we
the case.
anticipate that it will
But
be.
so you're the CEO of Alzamend Neuro. I would know this because I made sure you were hired.
Of course.
Which is a little fascinating for the audience to know that I founded Alzamend Neuro 4.5 years ago, and was never the CEO, but we wanted to bring a guy in, or a girl, woman, anybody who we thought was talented enough to bring the drugs to market. And Stephan became the leading candidate, and we eventually hired him. I think, how long ago did we hire you?
About a year ago.
Yeah. And he's done a remarkable job, and we've had some great success with the FDA. And it's in an area that I really care about. Most of the audience that know me know my father has Alzheimer's, my mother-in-law died from it, and a series of family members have. And so we're trying to do really something remarkable, and that is potentially slow the progression of Alzheimer's, treat it, and hopefully have a vaccine for it. And Stephan, so now that everyone knows that you're the CEO of Alzamend Neuro, let's go backwards. So you graduate, you get a master's from Stevens Institute of Technology, and you decide to go and you work for L'Oreal. And I'll let you skip around a little bit. Well, you go to work for L'Oreal.
So
I think you were there for what, 5 years or
3 years. So I graduated with my bachelor's. I went into corporate. So I went to work for L'Oreal in the management program. At that time, I think they called it the Command program. Now it's called the Explorer program. But it was a program where you start from the ground up and you learn the business. And within 5 years being with the company, you'd be senior management within the organization.
Right.
So after 3 years, I left the organization to go to Novartis. I was recruited away by Novartis Pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, they have what I know about L'Oreal, they have a really impressive management training program.
They do.
They have got an impressive track record. So you probably enjoyed your time there.
I did.
What'd you
It was
do
a lot
there?
of fun.
What'd you do
So
there?
I worked in pretty much project management, quality, and manufacturing supply chain. So it's a chance of, they pretty much sent me to Paris. I was in Stuttgart and Bologna, Italy. So Stuttgart, Germany, and Bologna, Italy. So kind of traveled, around the world for the company and understanding, how the products are made and how to pretty much mass produce any kind of lipstick, nail polish, mascara, plenitudes, which are lotions, and eye pencils. So it was a lot of fun. I loved it. So dealing with a lot of the manufacturing process and, how clean, the manufacturing floor and the processing vessels are. So it was really good. Learning all the regulatory mandates and then taking that with me to go to Novartis was pretty good.
So
I thought it was going to be a huge learning gap, but it really wasn't.
So it sets the stage for you to go to Novartis, and you go to Novartis, and I believe you were there a little bit more than 8 years, right?
I was.
And what did you do at Novartis? Because I know that they've been, in fact, my understanding is Novartis is really the last company to have anything even approved in the Alzheimer's space, the Exelon patch, right?
Novartis came out with the Epsilon patch in 2007.
Right.
They came out with the original Exelon pill in 2004. And when I moved over to Novartis, at first I was in manufacturing, kind of jumping around management process. And so I started in manufacturing and did it for about a year, didn't really like it. I said I wanted to do something a little bit different. So, I kind of, met with management and said, okay, I want to do something a little bit more. And they said, well, how about we put you on strategic projects, learning, the business here, and we'll put you on all our major initiatives that we're rolling out from the company. And so I pretty much did that, a lot of projects, I think totaling over $500 million,
Wow.
of global initiatives that they did. So
And
that was
like
fun.
L'Oreal, Novartis is a global business. Did you have any global experience with them? What was your area?
So Novartis was pretty much traveling to Basel. The mothership for Novartis, or the global headquarters, is in Basel. And they also have an office in Cambridge, Massachusetts. That's the NIBR Center. This is biomedical research. And they have a corporate office in New York City. And that's pretty much where investor relations sits. And then the main campus, which is a 500-acre campus, that's in East Hanover, New Jersey. So it's pretty much out of East Hanover, New Jersey. There's about 7,000 employees, about 39 buildings on site. So, if you meet someone, you'll pretty much, when I started in 2002 with the company, I met a bunch of people on the day that I was hired and have never seen them again.
So you leave Novartis eventually, and this is where it gets interesting, because I know you were helping a lot of companies in biopharma and other spaces. So what did you do after Novartis?
So after Novartis, I sat on the board while I was at Novartis. Novartis was really encouraging. They wanted their employees to be active within the community. So I sat on the board of a nonprofit organization and became the head of development and marketing for a nonprofit in New Jersey. I wanted to do something from a different, standpoint of health and human services and really raising, funds to help people within the community. And this particular organization helps about 10,000 people per year, children and families who are at risk of the kids being taken away from the families. And so I joined that organization for about 2 years, told the founder and CEO of the company I'd be here for about 2 years, then I'm going to move on and probably go back into pharma. I don't know at what level that I wanted to go. So I decided that my skills would probably be better utilized in biotech. That way you get to really have a lot of say in terms of how the drug's being developed and be nimble enough to use your skills to be creative. As you know, it takes a lot to get a drug to market. And from a biotech point of view, yes, you have a lot of say in terms of what happened, but the fundraising aspect of it is very difficult. But it's a challenge that I wholeheartedly accept. And I think that I could be good at it.
When we first met, we talked about African Americans that are in biotech, and there is an African American CEO for Merck. But what's the background been for you in the sense of being in biotech, being African American, running a biotech that's potentially going to be public? I mean, do you think about that at all? I know when we talked, you did. We had a little conversation about it, but what do you think is happening there in terms of diversity for the leadership side of the biotech and big pharma, and what happens for you in the future?
Well, I think leadership in biotech and big pharma lacks diversity in general. I think, when it comes down to having African Americans, as the leader of biotechs or big pharma companies, there's few and far in between. It's just that they're not given the opportunity.
So when you were approached, and I know there's some other important work you did in biotech, helping other biotech companies, and we
Yeah.
can come back to that. But when you were approached about the idea of working for a company that's focused on trying to slow down the progression or potentially cure Alzheimer's, I mean, that really that's been kind of the holy grail. No one's really been able to do that. I don't think there's really been any real developments since Dr. Alzheimer's, found the disease. Really, it's one of the rare diseases where nothing has really progressed. I know there's been some really ancillary stuff, but I mean, when you were approached with that, what was your thought process for taking the job?
Well, although Alzheimer's is the most feared disease and the sixth leading cause of death in the United States, I think you're pretty much the one who convinced me to take the job. I think listening to your story, you really were. I mean, listening to your story about how you found the company and how you were sitting in your living room and realizing how your family's been afflicted by this disease. And I was like, this is finally someone who is taking a stand and doing something about it. And I was just like, how heroic is that? And I would definitely want to get behind someone like that. And
well, I don't know if it was heroic, but
it was heroic. I consider it to be a huge deal.
Well, I'm excited that you're part of
Yeah.
it. The development so far is one of the things that I think is interesting is we made a decision to keep the overhead low, unlike some biotechs, which really have a big overhead. You run the company almost virtual with an outside CRO, et cetera. Can you talk about your experience in the way you're operating the business from almost a virtual perspective, the partnership with USF, and the team you're developing right now? Because I think it's an interesting model. It's really the cost structure is really for what you've spent and where you are, it's remarkable.
Oh, definitely. I think you can always when it comes down to pharma and developing, I think it's most important to stay laser focused on the science. There's nothing else that's more important. And I think, you're always looking at the timeline and knowing that your family's impacted by it and affected. I think the most important part is getting the drug to the clinic. And, it just makes sense to cut costs and really minimize the impact and have a low budget. And just having a virtual company with strategic partners, having the CRO being also not on site, they're remote, also having your partnership with the university where you license the technology from, having them part of your team, and having, a low overhead.
You've
internally.
also managed to line up a pretty
yeah.
amazing team, an advisory board of the who's who in Alzheimer's, which is, with Wisniewski and others.
Oh, I think it's all about relying on your Rolodex.
Right.
I think, I've worked in this business for over 13 years and, I've met a lot of people, and I have a lot of mentors within the industry. So I always reach back out to just about everyone who can do it. And I think, what we're doing is a neurological. Novartis has a huge neurology department. Otsuka Pharmaceuticals have one as well. I even have friends at Abbott Laboratories, Glaxo, as well as Celgene. So I think with that, you should never think about doing something on your own. And there's always people who you can rely on that will help you to get to where you want to get, to where you want to go.
Oh, so for those of you who are learning for the first time about Alzamend Neuro that are watching, it's important if you care about Alzheimer's to learn about these two drugs, specifically about Liprosol. I've been at this a while, and my family's affected. And those of you who are watching, who your families are affected by Alzheimer's, this will be something that you're ahead of the curve on, that you'll learn about today, that the general public does not know about. And a lot of people, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, have given up on this space. A lot of pharmaceutical companies have failed at what they're doing, right?
Yes, they have.
And with Liprosol, and I really think that people that have family members with dementia or Alzheimer's, or potentially have it, are going to care a lot about this drug in the future. So was wondering maybe you could talk about Liprosol and what you thought, what it could potentially do. We're talking about potential, the promise of the fact that there's 4 compounds that are already approved. For those of you who don't know, this drug is owned by Alzamend Neuro, of course, the company you're CEO of. I wonder if you could talk about, I really think, it's my personal opinion, I'm not a scientist, but everything I've read and been told by the people that work with us, the external community, the consultants and people that really have no vested interest in telling me what I want to hear, I'm really excited about it. I wonder if you could tell the public about it a little bit, to the extent you're willing to go into the details.
Well, gladly. So the first drug that we have is a lithium co-crystal. And as you know, lithium has been in existence for a century. And currently, lithium has been approved by the FDA for bipolar disorder. However, it's used off-label for PTSD, suicidality, and depression. The problem with lithium is that it's highly toxic. And so when you do take it, you have to have your blood monitored on a regular basis to make sure that, the side effects and everything else is not toxic.
The monitoring is very costly.
Which is very costly. So most doctors would love to prescribe lithium. However, it's just too costly. Our lithium, on the other hand, is co-crystallized, which means that we have a greater therapeutic index, which allows us to administer a lower dosage, and it gives you a greater bioavailability and biodistribution. So potentially what we anticipate is that our lithium, you won't have to have your blood monitor, and it's not going to be as costly as the current lithium market.
And I've seen some of the results, the preclinical results that were phenomenal. Can you talk about what you know about lithium being used for Alzheimer's patients and other studies? Because I understand that there has been progress with lithium, but the toxicity has really been the problem.
Exactly. So there have been clinical trials that have been conducted for lithium. However, the clinical trials, the results, which were excellent, showed that lithium does impact Alzheimer's disease, in terms of tau phosphorylation and beta amyloid, which are the biomarkers for Alzheimer's disease. We anticipate that, being that our lithium is a little bit better and can be administered at a lower dosage, we do anticipate that our lithium will pass and be even more successful than the current lithium on the market.
That's a pretty big market for lithium, right? And in terms of
the patient population for lithium alone is about potentially 34 million people.
And another 6 million for Alzheimer's.
Just about, yes.
Right.
Our lithium is less toxic and therefore a potential treatment for Alzheimer's disease.
That's an interesting soundbite. So the genesis of Liposol and there are studies out there now that you've used lithium in the past and they've tried it before. The toxicity. So theoretically, our window of our therapeutic window is going to be bigger, be smaller dosage, last longer, and
absolutely.
We've kind of, because I've seen some of the data, we've already kind of know where we think we're going with this. But what's the process going to be with the FDA? I know we're set to pursuing a 505(b)(2) path. What do you think the process is for this in terms of helping the community? Because I think that we need to make it clear to people that there's really 2 opportunities here, right? There's an opportunity to treat, 34 million plus people for psychiatric care, right? With lithium's already used for, but on a less toxic basis, saving a lot of money for the medical industry, right?
As well as
healthcare.
An additional 6 million for neurodegenerative. And lithium has so many medicinal properties and purposes that we anticipate that it can also impact the other neurodegenerative diseases, which is Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, ALS as well.
Wow.
So one of the members of our scientific advisory board has actually mentioned that lithium would be a great therapeutic for traumatic brain injury as well. So you're talking about all the sports players and, all the people all the veterans, that are impacted by, TBI.
So one of the things that I want the audience to get from this interview, because I'm sure some of them are saying, wait, you're interviewing a CEO who works for the company you founded. Yeah, well, that's the whole point about what I do for a living, right? And that is, we buy undervalued assets and disruptive technologies with a global impact. I can think of nothing more global impactful than what you're working on, Stephan.
Absolutely.
So in getting to the crux of, before we go to Child 22W, how Liposol you think can help them, and that is, so far, and let's just see if we agree on this and making sure that we can communicate this to the audience. Because I really want you, if you're, for the listeners, the people watching this and listening to this, and those of you who exercise, you just listen to the audio, I want you to take away that if you have someone in your family with Alzheimer's, we're trying to help. And so on top of the fact that we already know lithium is a very powerful drug that's toxic, and we're trying to remove the toxicity or lower the potential for toxicity, we hope for another endpoint, which is that it slows the progression of Alzheimer's and restores cognitive function. Can you talk about what that would look like in terms of, we expect to go into patients shortly. How long do you think it would be before this could be available to the public? And that's, and I know that you're just speculating, but we're just guessing here. But how long do you think before something this important could be available to the public?
So we're going after a 505(b)(2) process, which is a fast track within the FDA. It is considered to be a repurposed technology since lithium is already been approved, by the FDA. So we're allowed to skip a certain amount of steps. So we anticipate that we can get this drug commercially viable within 18 to 36 months, which would be fantastic.
Which would be fast too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fast
because usually the typical development period is 5 to 7 years, or even longer, depending on your results that you have within phase 1, 2, and 3. So I think this is fantastic. I mean, just to think about, as the years progress, last year it was about 5.2 million people with Alzheimer's. Now it's 5.8 million people. And as the years progress, it's just going to be more and more. So by 2022, you're going to have way over 6 million people, suffering from Alzheimer's.
Right.
And just the economic impact in general within the United States is over $200 billion. And so, just the families and the caregivers who are impacted by this, I mean, it's catastrophic. And I think it takes a huge toll on families.
It's a very expensive process. Very expensive. So obviously, you and I, we want to help as many people as we can. That's what we started. That's why I started Alzamend Neuro. That's why you came to work here, and run the company. But the unit economics are also important. It is a company that's raised capital from investors, and for the investors out there watching, I don't know if you can go into it, but with a patient population of 41 million, how big of a drug could this be?
Well, let's just put it this way. The last Wall Street Journal article that came out, they said the next big Alzheimer's drug is going to be worth easily $18 billion. So when you think about the patient population that we have, I mean, the numbers are staggering.
Right.
You're talking this would be a drug that potentially can bring you about $18 billion a year. And that's just for one drug.
Yeah, and it's hard to believe that this, that you got a patent worldwide on composition of matter. You got an amazing drug. It's making amazing progress. Coming out of a little company, it's going to be kind of a David and Goliath kind of thing, isn't it?
It's a massive undertaking. I think this is something that we probably definitely have to partner with a larger pharmaceutical company, in order to commercialize this product. This is something that, you're talking sales force that you'd have to hire, internal, investor relations and marketing, and, in terms of what you have to do. It's going to be epic.
So for the investors out there, you expect to go into 505(b)(2). That's your hope.
Definitely.
And then gather all that great data in phase 2, and then eventually partner with a big pharmaceutical that'll want to roll this out. I know we're boring you at home a little bit, but it's important for the investors and the community looking to be able to have the drug available, what that means. And effectively, you skip into a phase 2 process because lithium's already approved. You rely on some of that safety data. But you can talk about that process a little bit.
So the process would be, it's an expedited process. So we anticipate that our phase 1 is going to take less than a year, typically. And you skip right into a phase 2. You get to minimize the time as well on the phase 2 and the phase 3. And sometimes we'd probably be able to combine them. And that's based on your partnership with the FDA. The FDA is very amenable and concerned about the 5.8 million people suffering from Alzheimer's. So we anticipate that we'd be in the clinic first quarter of 2020.
Yeah, I was thinking about the unmet need, and for the audience to understand that there's really not been any real treatment for Alzheimer's of any substantive notion for forever, basically.
Not at all.
I mean,
there's 4 drugs on the market currently, and none of them impact the disease
right.
positively.
And so one of the things that I think we're hoping for is to get that unmet need status because of the data. And I've seen the data, and it's promising. It's pretty
Absolutely.
remarkable data. And those of you who are probably interested in the drug, you can go to Alzamend, alzamend.com, and you can get on the mailing list. It's going to be important to be there, especially if you have a loved one or family member, to track what's going on with the drug. That it was developed at the University of South Florida. These are important developments. We'll come back to Liposol in a second. It's exciting. I don't think people realize how big a deal it is. I know we've been able to fly a little under the radar.
It's a huge deal. It's something that we're kind of keeping it contained for now. But
I think this may be the first public interview you and I have ever done.
It is.
Right. So I think that if the audience can detect, we're a little cautious because we know the data, and the regulators are very strict on what you can say. But I can tell you that it's taking up more and more of my time. It's your full time. You do everything. You're 24/7, 365.
Mm-hmm.
I seem to talk to you any day of the week.
Every day.
You're all over the country trying to make this work. With Emory and all the partners you've developed so far. This little company, you've done a remarkable job of getting some great partnerships. So far, so good there. Child-22W, which is the second drug, which was really the first and became the second.
Exactly.
Not because we don't love it, but that's more of a vaccine, prophylactic, and much more complicated than the already existing 505b2, which we just talked about, where you kind of get to skip ahead. This one we're not going to be able to skip ahead.
Not at all.
Right.
Not at all. This is a totally new invention. This is something that came from the University of South Florida as well, under Dr. Chow. It's invented. It's a dendritic cell, immunotherapeutic vaccine.
This is a mutant peptide.
This is a mutant peptide. So
right. This is way scientific. This is like Star Trek stuff.
I mean, when you speak to any neurologist, they've talked about, it's like, you have 2 drugs in your pipeline, but we're really interested in the immunotherapeutic vaccine. Forget the lithium. We all know lithium works. That's great. We fine. If you're able to come up with a lithium that's non-toxic, or less toxic than what's currently on the market, you're going to hit a home run. But that's for the Wall Street guys to worry about. That's really nice, but we're looking for something that's totally inventive and new. And I think, that is, Child-22W. That is the vaccine.
When he started developing it, Dr. Chow, immunotherapy was kind of like a joke, and people were really not fond of it. Now it's turned into be a big deal. He was kind of ahead of the curve. So talk to us about that life cycle, because that's a much more expensive process. And I like the way you're going about it, really, which is you're going to go to market with the drug we know will help people right away, that we know is kind of the lower barrier to entry for psychiatric and neurodegenerative, and gets really accelerated if it shows promise for Alzheimer's. And I've seen the data, so I'm really excited.
Absolutely,
as I said.
With
Child-22W, we're talking about scientific stuff that's pretty crazy in terms of potentially even, hoping it's a cure, right? So
absolutely.
Can you talk about Child-22W a little bit?
Child-22W, the development life cycle for that, there's no fast track, within the FDA. I mean, once you enter phase 1, after your results from phase 1, which is a full year worth of testing, then you can actually get a fast track with the FDA, because you have to show that it impacts the disease.
Right.
And so we anticipated it will show that it impacts the disease, and not by just minimal numbers. We were expect to blow those numbers out of the waters because of what we've seen in our preclinical, and in terms of bioequivalence, and actually comparing it with what's been out there. The results have been just extraordinary.
Wow.
And I think it's fantastic. So for that one, we will be entering the clinic in 2020. And we anticipate that one is going to be just another home run for us. So when we talk about Child-22W, I think, once we're in the clinic, after a year, we'd be able to show that the results are so compelling that the FDA will partner with us and fast track that as well. We'll get what you call breakthrough status. Once you show that you are impacting the disease, the FDA will give you breakthrough status. And once you have breakthrough status, they literally partner with you to fast track the drug through the clinic. Especially with Alzheimer's being an unmet need, this is something that they would like to get a new therapy on the market for it as soon as possible.
I got to think that there's an audience out there that's watching. People care about their family members going, how is this little startup biotech that's 4.5 years old going to possibly treat or slow the progression of Alzheimer's? I think it's important to note the USF has been working on it for years. I mean, more than a decade, right?
Definitely.
And we really have partnered with the university, got a license from them. They're actual owners of the company. They own a stake in the company. And I think it's important for the audience to know that if those of you who are not familiar with biotech and big pharma, a lot of small biotechs develop the drugs before big pharma takes them on.
That's exactly what I was going to mention. Most big pharmas actually began as a small biotech. Amgen, you're talking Genentech, they all began as a small biotech. And then they morphed into, once they have a drug approved, it makes billions of dollars, they become a large pharmaceutical company. However, there's a lot of biotechs who just develop the drug, and then when they get to a certain phase 1 or 2 or 3, then they sell it to a larger pharmaceutical company, or they have a partnership with a larger pharmaceutical company. And you pretty much never hear about the biotech, but most new therapies are actually coming from biotechs.
So I'm already obviously an investor, but for the people out there that want to invest or considering investing, are already investors, what do you think the path is for their investment? Some of the people have been in a few years. I know there's some new investment that's recently come in, but in terms of your plans, what you'd like to see happen, in an ideal situation, Liposol continues to develop and gets approved to go into patients. What do you kind of see happening in terms of whether you want to make it, you want to stay in the biotech space, pharma space, or whether you think the drugs ultimately end up in the hands of big pharma?
One of the paths is that we can, once we get it to a certain level, at the end of phase 1, we can actually partner with a larger pharmaceutical company to commercialize the product. We can decide to take the company public, or the third option would be we can actually sell the drug to a big pharma, and they can just take it from there.
Typical path, right?
Continue to develop it.
Right.
So yeah,
we saw that happen kind of with Harvoni with hepatitis treatment, right?
Yes.
Where they got into phase 3 and they sold before they were done, basically.
Absolutely.
For a relatively big number, but they were actually curing hepatitis C, I think it was, right?
$11.2 billion.
Right.
They did sell it for. I mean, this is typical of the pharma space. I know there was Sanofi actually purchased a vaccine after phase 1 for about $2.5 billion.
Wow.
I mean, so there's a lot, when you're talking about pharma and the patient, once the patient population is actually there, and when you look at what the cost per patient per year is, I mean, these numbers are pretty massive. So I think, for this, you're talking blockbuster status. And when you say blockbuster status within the pharma industry, it's any drug that brings in over $1 billion revenue per year. The next Alzheimer's drug will be a blockbuster.
Of course, I'm excited for the economics. It's great for the investors. But what I'm really excited about is that it really seems like Liposol to get started, and then Child-22W pose an amazing opportunity for patients to be treated, and across the psychiatric community too. Because I know that the psychiatrists, doctors, and people I've spoken to over the last couple of years have said that they'd love to be able to prescribe it, obviously, and reduce the risk of toxicity.
Definitely.
And that never understood why lithium works, but it worked amazingly well. I mean, that's an interesting dilemma with lithium, right? You remember? I remember reading about when I was a kid. There was lithium in the water in Kentucky, and there was like a happy community, right?
Absolutely.
And I don't know if people know this, is a little anecdote, but if you ever remember 7-Up.
7-Up originally was with lithium.
Originally had lithium in it, right? And
made you happier.
Yeah, exactly. So this is exciting, I think, for the. What do you think if you have a family member, a loved one, or yourself have been diagnosed? What can they be doing now to be following the drug and paying attention to its development? I know that the initial studies can be done at Emory University. Obviously loved ones are always looking for something out there. What can they be doing now to track the development of the drug?
So one of the things that they can do, they can go to our website, Alzamend, ALZAMEND.com, and subscribe to our newsletter.
Right.
But in addition to that, we will be launching a Regulation A within 90 days.
Yeah, let's talk about that with the audience. So we as a company decided that we would allow the general public, the masses, the average individual investor, not just accredited investors, to own part of the solution. And there's a couple reasons why. One, it's broad appeal. Two, we want as many people to know about these two drugs. They're developed basically with the University of South Florida and a small team with your executive team. And rather than put money into marketing and all the stuff we're doing, we're actually going to basically have hopefully our shareholders be word of mouth to the community, and help push through the drug as best we can. And for that, we're going to be doing a Regulation A, which is what they call a Reg A, and that is that the average person, I think, with a net worth that can invest as little as $100 and a maximum 10% of your income. That'll be coming up in the next 90 days or so. That'll be important to continue the development of it. You guys have, as we talked about earlier, you have a strict budget. You're keeping it low cost. I know some of the
Absolutely.
I know you came from Novartis where they had billions and billions and billions of dollars.
This is more along the lines of your bootstrapping, grassroots, and just pretty much getting it through the process. And I think we've done a great job thus far of raising funds to really push this and move this drug through the clinic. It's a cure for all.
Right.
And it impacts everyone. Every 65 seconds, someone is diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. So I think, it's something that's not going away.
$230 billion a year in healthcare cost alone.
Absolutely.
I think it's important for the audience to go Google lithium for Alzheimer's and see that there is a history here. And with our new drug, basically lowering that toxicity level, there's a lot of promise here to help patients.
And I always say that an informed investor or an informed supporter is the best kind of advocate to have for your organization. And most important, people should go to clinicaltrials.gov and definitely look this up. If you look up lithium on clinicaltrials.gov, you'll see about 10 to 20 clinical trials that have been administered for Alzheimer's, and you'll see the results have shown that it does impact the disease.
I want to make sure that the audience knows. Listen, we are not soliciting you to be an investor. We care deeply about the disease. I care about it. Stephan's team cares about it. So regardless of whether you're an investor or someone concerned about a family member or just want to help, go to the website and check out what we're doing. It's important to get the word out to the Alzheimer's community that will be available. And so whether you're an advocate for it or someone who's concerned about a loved one, it's not just about investing. There's a lot of people that want to invest, so we're not really worried about that. It's really a promising treatment. So go there, and hopefully you'll be able to pass along this as someone you care about. I
think within the next year we're going to have we're going to become known, of having something that's extremely exciting, for the world.
Right.
I think we're going to have a lot of more allies than we do now.
So I'm more than thrilled that you came in. I know you had to come in from Atlanta, and I appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Thank
you
for
having
me.
me.
You're running the company. I love what you're doing. I love the progress you're making, and I can't wait for the public to find out about it. That's what I'm really excited about.
It's going to be
I
very
think
exciting.
that I know you're not a big cheerleader like me. I get accused of over cheerleading, and this is one of those times where you guys have had to hold me back.
I tend to be a little bit more reserved.
Right, and I've been holding back. I've been biting my tongue, even though I saw the results preclinically. So.